But let's talk about the 4 idle spells for Shadow. So I was on Max's stream the other day, and he mentioned that Shadow Priest got some new talents, and that's why he wasn't gonna originally put them in Swamp. I don't remember where he actually put it. I think the Shadow Tree has a lot of problems. I would rate it D or F tier currently, and that's just my opinion. So anyways, he was like, well, I think there are some cool new spells in here. They just need to change pathing and stuff. I think that's oversimplifying it, but I think a lot of people have this opinion that it's like, well, Shadow got these new idle spells, which thematically sound cool. So if you're not aware, the 2 bottom left and 2 bottom right things are idle spells. Each one of them is attached to an old god. So we have Idol of Y'Sharj, N'Zoth, Yogg-Saron, and Cthulhu. Right? 2 of these are brand new, never before seen in the game, and 2 of them have been brought back from other things in the game. So I think each one of them is, like, the thing is, like, thematically, the idea of, like, a Shadow Priest, like, aligning to an old god. Sign me up. Sounds great. Like, I'm loving it as an idea. I think the problem is a lot of these abilities, I think, fall short in practice, where they might read a little bit better. And the reason why I was kind of saying, like, aligning to something is, as someone just pointed out, right, you can only pick one at a time. There's no way at level 70 with max points to get more than one, because these are choice nodes, so you can either pick one or the other once you get down here, and you don't have enough points to go all the way left and all the way right in the tree. You just don't. By quite a lot. It's not even close. So it's relatively obvious that they wanted you to kind of do that, which I think is fine. In the sense of, like, that should be like the capstone idol to your playstyle, right? Okay, so let's go over them from left to right. Idol of Y'Sharj. Shadow Fiend causes you to gain a benefit based on your target's emotional state. Also works with Mindbender if you're using that instead. Read's kind of funny, right? If you haven't seen it, right? You know, kind of a weird thing. What I think is really interesting about this is Idol of Y'Sharj is the only thing in this tree at all related to Mindbender or Shadow Fiend. Not a single other node in our spec tree hits Mindbender or Shadow Fiend. Not a single one. So it's really weird for a capstone idol to buff something that we don't actually build into. And this is, I think, one of the main problems with Idol of Y'Sharj is that it's a capstone to our build, but there's nothing to build into this, right? The only thing that builds into it comes from the class tree. And this is kind of another problem with the class tree itself, is all the Shadow Fiend Mindbender buffing stuff is all right here, right? So the problem is that, like, you're kind of, to build a Shadow Fiend build, you can kind of get it for free because you just pick all the things in the class tree and then you get this 1 point in the spec tree. So that part doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, right? And yes, I do think we still have the most points in the bottom section of our tree, I believe, because we have 2 3-point nodes, which is relatively uncommon these days. So that's not my favorite part. The other big problem with this is, so let's actually explain how this works. So when it says Shadow Fiend gives you a benefit based on your target's emotional state, the way it's supposed to work, it's pretty buggy right now, is every melee swing of Shadow Fiend or Mindbender will give you something extra, right? By default, if you talent into everything, all that's going to do is give you damage and insanity. With this talented, you can get a haste buff, you can get a damage to increase, or you can get insanity. There's a couple different options depending on if the target is currently feared or stunned or above a certain health threshold, things like that. I don't want to get into, like, too specifics because they could change, but basically, like, think of it as, like, your target's current state in far as, like, health goes or crowd control, that kind of thing. So I think one of them, if it's like, if your target is feared, it will continue. I think you get, like, damage increased to feared targets, and that damage also does not break fears. Sounds pretty cool in PvP for sure. There's another one that if the target is enraged, it will dispel that enrage on that melee swing, right? Very cool, kind of niche, more kind of utility-ish stuff, I would say. Importantly, doesn't change how you play at all, right? You're not gonna, like, Mindbender is a 1 minute cooldown. There might be a situation you might delay it 10 or 20 seconds if you really need to dispel an enrage, but it's really not something in a PvE scenario you're going to interact with very much. And it's very dependent on Shadow Flame Prism balancing if you'd even use it, right? And again, that's kind of what I'm talking about, having these kind of disjointed parts in the tree. Biggest problem with that as an idol. Exactly. So someone just put it in chat, right? Like, it's not changing your gameplay. It's just giving you something extra for pressing what you're already pressing, right? Not really a fun, interactive capstone idol talent, in my opinion. So that's Idol of Yogg-Saron. Not my favorite. Yeah, kind of lame, kind of disappointing. And again, it might be bugged, so take that, what I just showed, with a grain of salt. Right? Okay, next one. Idol of N'Zoth. This is by far the best of the four, for sure. So what it does is, damage dealt by any of your 3 dots has a 20% chance to apply Echoing Void to your enemy. Each time Echoing Void is applied, it has another chance. So you have a 20% chance to apply the dot. Every time you apply a dot, you have a chance for that to collapse. Now, what that means is, okay, so did I talent into it? Alright, let's put Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch on the mob. So, I'm not getting a whole lot of dot ticks. I only have, I guess I have quite a bit of haste right now. Come on. Okay, there you go. I got 1 stack. Took a little bit, but I'm getting there. Oh, now I have 3, right? Gotta love these flat chance effects. Okay, so every time I get a proc, you can see it's incrementing this dot, or this extra debuff, magic debuff on the target, right? And if I hopefully get a proc, oh no, okay, so I got another one. So each time it's doing that, it's rolling a dice to see, okay, I'm gonna actually explode it. It hasn't happened yet. This is one of the biggest points of feedback. Okay, it's happening, right? See how it's exploding now? And now that's in exploding mode, everyone's ticking down is causing AoE damage until it fizzles out. And you can see he's actually adding stacks in there independently of it exploding the stacks, which is interesting. So that's Idol of N'Zoth, right? Pretty minor on single target, but has a lot of AoE potential because that's an AoE damage effect. You know, which is cool. So yeah, the main problem with this is it's scaling with attack power currently, so not exactly it's not doing correct damage by any means, but the playstyle is interesting in the sense that if you spread your dots more, you'll get kind of passive AoE damage. Some issues with this idol, the main one is you know, if a target dies while it has stacks, you just lose those stacks. So that can be kind of annoying when, like, you saw it took me quite a long time to explode it. If you think about a Mythic Plus pack that's lasting 10, 15, 20 seconds, it can be kind of annoying if you're building up all these stacks and then it doesn't do anything. So that's kind of annoying. You also don't control when the explosion happens. So I think some more protections around that, whether, like, if a mob dies, it moves its stacks somewhere else to another mob, or it immediately explodes for all stacks when it dies. You know, things like that. Some people have actually done a suggestion, which I'd like to play around with, of, like, you actually could attach the explosion additionally to another button, maybe Shadow Word Death, maybe just another active ability that's explode N'Zoth stacks, right? That way you have some agency over building stacks, exploding them at the right time, right? So definitely has potential here. This is by far the coolest of the four, in my opinion, but yeah, it has some little, like, issues to work out, I think, is the biggest concern there. Yeah, but definitely something, it's interesting. It's interesting. Although obviously, and like someone pointed out in chat, in order for this to be, like, really strong, we need a good way to spread our dots, right? Especially in AoE, which kind of gets back to the Searing Nightmare problem, which I'm not going to talk about right now, but yeah. So that's Idol of N'Zoth. Let's talk about Idol of Yogg-Saron. Okay, so after conjuring 50 shadowy apparitions, you summon a thing from beyond. It serves you for 20 seconds, right? This thing just blasts nearby enemies for shadow damage. All right, let's add this up. Okay, so on the surface, it's kind of interesting because it's like, okay, well, if you pick something that's, like, big into spawning apparitions, this has a lot of promise, right? Now, unfortunately, Idol of Yogg-Saron is bugged in game, so it's hard to really get a good feel for how the spell should work. We have modeled it in Sims though, so we can kind of talk about how it should work. All right. So let's get our Yoggy boy to spawn. Okay, so apparitions are spawned right now by putting Vampiric Touch out on targets, right? Pressing Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, and Void Bolt. That's the kind of TLDR there. So let's go ahead and do that. Get some Vampiric Touches. Right? Okay, hit Mind Blast once. See, I only got 1 stack there, even though I generated 3 apparitions. That's the bug. Should have got 3 there, only getting 1. So it's considerably harder to proc this than it should be. So that's the main bug right now. But you see it, I am slowly stacking this up. So the problem is, this means it is much harder to test how it should work, at least on dummies. With stat weights goes more towards crit, I assume. Yeah, you would think so. At least it has more crit scaling than anything else. Right, the question is, does the pet that it spawns scale with haste or mastery, right? That could balance that out effectively. 49, 50. Oh, didn't do, okay. So he has 50 stacks. Boom. There he is. Oh my god, look at him. Look at that cute little boy. Okay. So he's massive, so that looks cool. Does not do very much damage. It's very low. It's almost unnoticeable how little damage it's doing. He looks cool though, right? So like that's basically the only thing that the talent has going for it. Is that, you know, it's pretty, yeah. If they fix the bugs, right, and we kind of work out, right, depending on what it scales with, like if more haste gives it more casts, and if that's intended, does it scale with our mastery, right? These are all questions we're not sure yet, right? Nope, this one does scale with spell power. It's not AD broken. So, you know, who's to say? The spell animation, kind of whatever. The guy looks cool though, but the animation's kind of meh. So yeah, if they fix all the problems with like how it stacks and things like that, it's still not going to be very good. And it's kind of going to be reliant on its tuning. And again, kind of what I mentioned before is, it's not really changing what you want to do so much, because remember, the way you get it is by spawning shadowy apparitions. Maybe it changes how you want to gear, like add more crit. But if you think about it, we're already trying to proc apparitions. Like, you're not going out of your way in the spec and the way that it's playing to spawn apparitions. Like, it's not something extra that you're doing, right? You're already wanting to keep Vampiric Touch up all the time on as many targets as possible for your mastery, right? Check. And you already press Mind Blast and Devouring Plague and Void Bolt more or less on cooldown, right? So it's not really changing what you want to do. Could maybe add some crit scaling to your gear, but that's it. Doesn't actually do anything for what you want to play with, right? Very similar, again, to a lot of the other idols. It's not really changing what you're trying to do. It's just adding more flavor to it, if that makes sense. So I think that's also kind of a bit of a letdown for it, even though it kind of looks cool. The other major problem with it, because it's at 50 stacks, even if it works the way it's supposed to, by the time you actually get 50 apparitions, your cooldowns are already over in the opener, right? Like way past that. I think when we were testing, if it works the way we think it should, you get your first proc between like 40 and 50 seconds. Well, by then our cooldowns are already gone, right? Power Infusion only lasts the 20 seconds. Void Eruption by default, I think, is just 15 seconds, I thought. You get my point, right? Like, your stuff is over by then. So it's just not lining up at good times. There's no agency. It's not changing your rotation. Don't care for another pet, honestly. Yep. I mean, that's fair, right? It also doesn't work with Puppet Master, which could be something else that would tie into our kit, at least mastery-wise, right? Doesn't work with Shadow Flame Prism. Could be another fun thing, too. I mean, I don't know. There's no benefit to getting another pet in our kit. Yeah, I mean, moving capstones, improving on them, I think is definitely something I wish they would look at for sure. They just need to be more playstyle impacting is, I guess, what I'd be looking for, right? So that's Idol of Yogg-Saron. So, yeah, that's the other good point shot, is that Idol of Yogg-Saron is full single target, right? the bullets that it's doing is only single target, which is kind of weird because you get more apparitions on multi-target, meaning it should kind of be a multi-target pet, right? In the sense that that's when you're going to get the most apparitions for it. So it would be cool if it was leaning into that build, and right now it's not. On live, it's impossible to check of like, what if you get more than one pet at a time? Like, do the pets stack? Do they extend their duration? Right now, because of the bug, we don't know how that's going to work. Maybe you spawn more than one pet, but even if you do that, I don't know. Like, I guess you maybe get funnel damage out of it, but it's not really, I don't know. The idea doesn't seem fully fleshed out yet. Yeah, no, they have not fixed Yogg-Saron. It's still broken. So yeah, so that's Yogg-Saron. So this is our last one, and like I mentioned at the top of this long segment, Idol of Cthulhu is a returning spell. This is coded almost exactly the same way it is in our current legendary for Shadowlands, Eternal Call to the Void. Some of you guys might have used this at the very start of the expansion in Castle Nathria. It has not been used since. Now, that being said, we did have tentacles in Legion as well, if you remember. It was just a passive in our artifact trait, right? I think it was it just called Call to the Void then? I forget. They've changed it, right? But, you know, the idea is the same of, like, stuff in our kit that spawns tendrils. Oh, man. Thematically, they just look so cool. I mean, it's just sick, right? Like, there's no other way to describe it. It's just really cool, right? Like, you can't, it's hard to, you know, they just look sick, right? Slash wave. So, I mean, what it has going for it is that it looks cool, right? And the nice part about it, and this was feedback we gave in Shadowlands beta, when you cast Mind Flay, you have a chance to spawn a Mind Flay tendril, so a tendril that Mind Flays your target. Now, if I go to Mind Seer instead, it's like, oh, you're in AoE mode now. So instead, I'm going to give you a chance to spawn a Void Lasher instead of a Void Tendril. As you can see here, it's taken quite a long time. This is a pretty low RPPM effect. So a chance on your tick to spawn a tendril, right? That tendril, that chance is affected by haste though. So the more haste you get, the more procs you will get. It's kind of a problem for the design of the spec in the sense that early on in the expansion, it's going to be kind of bad because you don't have a lot of haste to get a lot of procs, right? The problem though is the main value of the proc. Oh, okay, so we're getting one. You can see it's giving me, oh, that's just bugged. It's not giving me any insanity. It's supposed to, right? It's a nice little bug. Oh, it's not even doing damage. Oh no, it doesn't do any damage. All right, so that's okay, new bug. Found another bug. Thought I found them all, but there you go. So it's supposed to give you insanity every time it does damage, right? The problem that I was saying is that, like, early on in the expansion, when we don't have a lot of gear, getting more insanity can be valuable because we're still gearing out. But what you saw in Shadowlands, at the end of the expansion, you got a lot of haste, you got a lot of gear. You're kind of flooded with insanity. Like, we have more than we need right now, especially like in the middle of our cooldowns, right? Where you're kind of like, you're choosing what to drop, right? Not very fun at all. But you have a lot of haste. So by the time you're getting a lot of procs, right, for Idol of Cthulhu, you now don't need the insanity. So it's kind of, it has this really weird problem of like, there might be a sweet spot in the middle of like how much haste you have, how many procs you're getting, but it's not like a good scaling pick. The talent kind of like will live and die based on that kind of awkward balancing. So yeah, it looks cool. It fits the theme perfectly. Great, right? What it actually is giving us though is not good enough, right? I don't actually think I want an RPPM insanity proc. It just doesn't, I don't know, like, you definitely felt it more in Legion, and we watched a video on stream last week where you saw me doing like a 2-minute surrender, right? And you could tell when you got a tentacle in Legion, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting more insanity now. It feels good. Get some more breathing room in my rotation. That doesn't matter anymore. Like, getting random procs of insanity, whatever. You spend a little bit, you cast a little bit more Devouring Plagues, right? So I think this actually would do better if it was reworked into something else. Like maybe just remove the insanity component altogether, give it damage. But then if you do that, the important kind of downside with it is right now, is that it's off of Mind Flay and Mind Sear, right? Which, you know, so let's go ahead and single target up our rotation. So you would Shadow or Death, Mind Blast. I don't know if we'll do once or twice, right? Okay, so we're doing our rotation, right? Oh, guess I'll press Damnation. Get a Mind Games in here. Sweet. Devouring Plague. Oh, Devouring Plague. Sure, why not? I'm dropping Void Bolts. That's okay. We're cooldowning. Everything's great. Is anyone noticing anything? Okay, cooldowns are done. Hey, look, I got a Tendril. That's the problem, right? I didn't cast Mind Flay at all on my cooldowns, right? And that's just how the spec works right now. In that Mind Flay and Mind Sear is a filler part of our rotation. We're not pressing because we don't need to. We have so much other stuff to press, which I think is a separate problem in and of itself, right? Like having all those charges, having 3 charges of Mind Blast in Void form, having Void Bolt be such a low cooldown, right? Like being kind of, quote, flooded with insanity and casting a lot of Devouring Plagues, having extra, like I didn't even press Void Torrent and I have Void Torrent, right? Like you have Void Torrent, Shadow Crash, and Damnation, and Mind Games, all to press in Void form as well. Like, it's too much, right? So we don't actually proc Mind Flay, the Mind Flay Tendril at all, right? So Idol Cthulhu is, like, way nerfed anytime you're adding stuff into the rotation that takes you away from pressing Mind Flay or Mind Sear, right? Which I think is fine design. Like, I don't think adding spells into Mind Flay and Mind Sear, like, they're filler spells, right? And I don't think attaching power or damage to them is the right call. So that's Idol of Cthulhu. So yeah, and they can change this by lots of different ways, right? Like chance on, dot tick, apparition hit, right? Like I don't know, right? The problem with any of those solutions is that it is somewhat, quote, elegant in the sense that you get the single target tendril when you cast a single target thing. Mind Flay, Mind Sear gives you the AoE tentacle because it knows what you want to do in that situation. But they could easily change that to work the way Living Shadow does, which it just gives you the AoE one every time, right? And they balance it around single target, and it turns out it's our like top damaging ability in Mythic Plus right now, right? Or it's, you know, up there. Exactly, yeah, copied from part of Legion. And again, like in Legion, getting a proc of Insanity meant something. And it meant something completely different to how the spec plays right now. And that kind of thing just can't be copy and pasted around, right? Like, it just doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense. Which is hard because it's, like, thematically cool. Like, it's like, we like the tendrils. They're fun, right? And, you know, it's just, yeah, it just doesn't make sense. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a lot left to be desired, I think. A lot of people, including myself, saw these and were like, oh, wow, these are all intriguing. And they all kind of seem that way at the surface, but I think digging down, and hopefully that's kind of what I've shown, is that once you know, dig into each one of them, they have their problems, right? TLDR, back to the drawing board. I mean, I don't know. I don't think you need to, like, full scrap any of these. I think they just need to be iterated on. With the one exception of Idol of Yogg-Saron, I'm not quite sure how you iterate on this without and have it make sense based on where it is and all the Mindbender Shadow Fiend stuff. That one's gonna be hard, I think, to iterate on. I think you'd have to move a lot of stuff around and then go from there. So I love how I was like gonna go to subconsciously like go into Orbos, like I'm an idiot.